Hello class. This video is going to give you a brief overview of how to use Visual Studio 2010. Visual Studio 2010 is our integrated development environment, or IDE, that we are going to be using to develop our programs. Like I have previously stated, you cannot just turn your computer on and decide that you want to write a program. You have to, one, decide what development environment you're going to be using, which we have selected Visual Studio, and you also have to decide which programming language that you're going to be writing in. And we will be using Visual Basic.net. Please do not confuse the IDE Visual Studio with our programming language Visual Basic. Alright, so let's get started. If you haven't opened up Visual Studio already, please do so now. Pause the video if necessary. If you have Visual Studio open and you don't see this screen, it's more than likely asking you to choose a default programming language. The first time you open up Visual Studio on any computer, it will ask you this. I've already have mine selected, so that's why you don't see it now. But if you could, please go ahead and select Visual Basic for your default programming language, because that is what we will be using in Programmer 1. Once you select your language, you should see this main startup screen. You will see this startup screen every time you start Visual Studio, unless you uncheck the show page on startup option. So first we have to create a new project. You can create a new project one of three ways. You can, one, click New Project here. Two, click File, New, Project, which is also Control, Shift, and N. Or you can, three, click the New Project icon, hit the drop down menu, and select New Project. So if you would please use one of those options to create a new project. Once you create a new project, the new project window is going to pop up where you're going to make sure that you have your correct language selected and the actual new project type that you are creating. I teach 2 levels of programming, so mine is incorrect right now. I need to actually go and select the proper language. So I'm going here to other languages. It should just ever happen to you. This is all you have to do to get to the other ones. Or should you want to play around with other languages, just click on other languages, Visual Basic, and we're going to be creating Windows Forms applications. So just make sure that you have Visual Basic on the left selected and Windows Form application selected here. Give your project a name. We're going to name this Walkthrough. You should also be able to see a browse button where you can navigate to the exact location you want to save your file. But if you do not see it, no worries, you'll have an option to save your file later. Okay, so now just hit OK and your project is going to be created. Sometimes it does take a few seconds for the project to load up, so just please be patient and give it a little time. Once your project does load, you will see a form here. This is the main object of your project that you're going to be using to put all your other control objects on top of. You can easily resize this form by dragging the handles at the bottom. But before we talk too much about objects, let's first take a look at these windows. The first window we're going to be looking at, and that we are currently looking at, is the design window. The design window is the window in the area in which we're going to be designing your actual program. Another window we're going to be looking at is the Solution Explorer window. The Solution Explorer manages the files in your program and keeps them all organized for you. You can see which files are contained within your program by looking at the Solution Explorer. You can also get to our next window through the Solution Explorer by right-clicking the form and selecting View Code. You can also get to the next window, the Code window, by selecting F7. This is our code window. This is the window in which we will write all the code for our program. The last window we're going to look at for now is the Properties window. The Properties window allows us to customize the objects that make up our program, such as adjusting their color, font, size, etc. For instance, we can easily change the background color of our form object by simply adjusting the back color property. Hitting the drop down menu will show us different options, and we can just easily select another one. Notice that you have to actually have the object that you're trying to customize selected in order for the properties window to show up accurately. Without it selected, it doesn't want to do right now. There it is. When it's not selected, you will not see all the properties that you can adjust. So make sure if you're looking for the rest of them, just make sure that your window or your object is actually selected. In order to put other control objects onto the form, you have to use the toolbox. You can access the toolbox by selecting the toolbox. The toolbox icon is located at the top of your Visual Studio program. Most of all the objects located in the toolbox are self-explanatory by their name. Buttons, checkboxes, so on and so forth. Should you ever close your toolbox or any of your other windows on accident, you can simply open them back up easily by hovering over your icons at the top of your Visual Studio program and selecting the icon for the window that you need to open. You can also use Visual Studio to help you position your window so that your screen is more organized to better develop with. You can easily put your mouse over one of the positions and let it go, and it will drop that window wherever you have it located at. And you can kind of just hover over each different location to see exactly where Visual Studio is trying to dock that window. Of course, if you don't like it, you can always just move it. And now I'm going to show you how to walk through the walkthrough assignment. This document looks like this, and you will find it in the Google Classroom. We've already started a new project. So now let's add the following controls from our toolbox. First, let's add a button. Double click or drag. And let's change the name. And note we are changing properties. Let's change the name property of the button. I have the button selected. Going over here, I have the properties window open. I'm going to change the name to my button to BTN and hello. Enter. I named the button BTN hello. One, because BTN is short for button. And hello is what we're going to be using the button for, to say hello. When you're naming objects, it's important that you give it a prefix so that way that you know what kind of object it is. So if you have a button, the prefix, the name should start with the prefix BTN. If you have a label, the name of the label should start with the prefix LBL. These naming conventions, also called Hungarian notation, makes it easier for you when you start to write the code for your program. You can easily remember the names of your objects, what type of objects these are, and what you have these objects set to be used for. Now that we've given the object a name, let's now change the text property of our button. The text is whatever the user is going to see. As you can see right now, our text property is set to button 1. You can see here the user would see button 1 when we decided to run our program. Let's change that text to hello. Now we have a button named BTN hello, and it has the text hello. Next, what we would like to do is we would like to add a label. So we're going back to our toolbox. We're going to double click or drag the label object, and we are going to give our object a new name. Of course, it's a label, so we want to start the name out with the prefix LBL to help us remember that this is a label object. and we're going to use this to display a message. So we'll just put LBL message. Now, I want to erase the contents of my label, but if I do right now, you won't be able to hardly see my label anymore. So what I recommend you do before you delete your contents of your label, and if you've done so already, just highlight your area to find your label again. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the auto size property from true to false. This makes it so the computer does not size your label for you. You can go ahead and make it whatever size you want. And in addition to that, we're going to change the border style to fixed 3D. This is so we can still see where our label is at even if nothing is in it. So I've got a label named LBL message, and I have deleted the text of that label. Alright, this is where we're at now. Feel free to pause the video if you need to catch up. So one other thing that I'm going to do before I add any code is I'm going to select my button and my label at the same time, and I'm just going to change my font because I hate the default 7 or 8 font that they're giving us. So I'm going to just make it 14 so it's a little bit bigger. And of course, by me doing that, I have to readjust the size of my button. So I've got that there. Now we want to go ahead and start some code. Now, as a reminder, you can get to the code window through a couple of ways. One, you can right click in the Solution Explorer window, right click the form1.vb file, right click it, and you can select View Code. You can hit F7 on your keyboard. You can go to View Code on the menu strip, or you can double click one of your objects, or the object in particular that we're trying to program. So right now I'm going to have you F7. So once you have clicked or hit F7 on your keyboard, you should come up now to the code window. If you don't see the code window, please be sure that you selected F7 or use one of the other methods to get to the code window. We're going to now create a click event. A click event is pretty much like the name says. It's creating an event that is going to execute once something is clicked. So what we're going to create a click event for is for our BTN hello button. Once the user clicks the button, we want something to happen. So first we're going to use our left drop down menu that has a list of all of the objects that we have in our program. We're going to create a click event for our BTN hello button. So we have the button selected, and on the right drop down menu it has all of the behaviors that we can assign, or events that we can assign to those objects. So we want to create a click event for the BTN hello button. What this means is when the user clicks the BTN hello button, we want something to happen. Now what we want to happen is when the user clicks the button, we want a message to be displayed in the label that says hello. So what we have to first do is access the object that we are trying to change, and that's the label. Because right now you can see from our form, even if we run our program, and we can do so by hitting the green arrow or hitting F5 on our keyboard, if we run our programs right now, we will see that there's nothing inside the label right now. And what we want to happen is when we hit hello, click hello, we want hello to be displayed in the label. So when the user selects the button, we want a message to be displayed in the label that says hello. Right now we have nothing in our text property and the label doesn't say anything. Well, we could have hello displayed in the text property if we just simply change it in the properties window, but we don't want to do that, because in that way that means it doesn't change. We only want hello to pop up after we've clicked the button. So let's go back to our program and let's manipulate the code. Let's start by typing in the name of our label, LBL. There is IntelliSense, a built-in program to assist you. Be sure to use it. So that way you don't accidentally misspell your properties or your objects and you don't know what's going on. You're saying, hey, I have an error. I don't know why I have this error, and it's because you have misspelled your object. So just make sure you go ahead and use IntelliSense, because that will help you make sure you use whatever it is that you coded. In addition to that, be mindful that a capital M and a lowercase m are not the same in programming. Now, Visual Basic, like Word, will try to correct you sometimes, but it won't always correct your errors. So you have to make certain that if you use a lowercase m when you initially gave your object a name, when you get ready to use it, you need to make sure that you're still using that lowercase or capital or whatever it is that you're using for your object names. So we want to adjust the text property. So go ahead and put a period, and IntelliSense is still popping up and letting you know that the most common property that is adjusted with the label object is the text property. So go ahead and hit the tab key so we can use a text property. Hit a space and hit equals. The equals is the assignment operator. What that means is we are assigning something. And what we're assigning is we're assigning a new value to the text property of the LBL message object. So I'm going to say that one more time. We are assigning a new value to the text property of the LBL object. This is the LBL object. This is the text property, which is currently blank, but through the code, we're going to adjust it to something different. All right? Whenever we are trying to input a string of text, that's letters or words or whatever, it has to always be enclosed in quotation marks. So we're going to put one quotation to start typing our string of text. And we're just going to put hello. And we're going to say end quotation. All right? And all we're going to do now is hit enter. And as long as your code looks like what I have here, you should be fine. I want you to go ahead and hit F7 on your keyboard or hit the green debugging icon at the top and run your program. And then I want you to select the button hello, and you should see hello in the label. Now, before we move on to our next area, we have a couple of things that I want to go over first. One, comments. Now, I told you before that comments are extremely important, especially, for, a programmer to be able to later on go back and modify his code, or for someone else to be able to take on that project. So you want to get in the habit of creating comments. You can create a comment by selecting, adding an apostrophe. Alright, and once you do that, you add an apostrophe, it immediately turns green. Anything after that apostrophe is considered a comment, and the computer will not execute it as code. So you can say assigns value to label. This just lets you know what that line of code does. In addition to providing comments for confusing lines of code, which I know this is not a confusing line, I just want to give you an example of writing a comment. You also want to provide comments of the person who created the program. So you always want to make sure at the start of every program you go ahead and include your name, the date, the name of the program, and what class you were in. And again, you can easily add comments by just adding an apostrophe, and whatever you type after the apostrophe will turn green and it will be a comment. The computer will not execute it as code. You only want to make sure that confusing lines of code or anything that might be a little bit unclear as to what is going on with that block of code, those are the things that you want to comment. So later on, if it's 2 or 3 years that have passed by and you have to go back and look at this code again, or someone else is working on it, they kind of get an idea of what it is that you were trying to accomplish. Now before I tell you any more about the code, let's add a few more objects. Return to the design window, open up your toolbox, and let's get a group box. The group box control is for holding pretty much checkboxes and radio buttons and things like that. We're going to add a few radio buttons to our group box. Let's go down to the R's, radio button. I'm going to double click it one time, and then I'm going to copy it to add two more. So now let's change the properties of the radio buttons. The first radio button will be used for English, so we're going to name it RAD English and give it a text property value of English. The next one we're going to name RAD French, and we're going to change the text property to French. Lastly, we're going to name this radio button RAD German, and of course change the text property to German. So now let's program these objects to do something when they are clicked. So I'll show you a simple way of creating a click event now by double clicking. So let's double click our first radio button, English. Once we double click it, we will see that a click event has been created automatically for us. So all we have to do now is go and add the code. Now I like lazy programmer, and lazy programmer for me means copy and paste. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line of text, because when I click the radio button, I still want it to say hello, right? So I'm going to just copy that text and paste it there. I also want to create radio buttons for French and German, so I'm going to double click those as well, copy and paste, but instead of it saying hello in English, I want it to say hello in French. I'm going to do the same thing for German. Copy and paste, and now let's say hello in German. Run your program by clicking the green debugging icon or selecting F5 on your keyboard. A couple of things I want you to notice. One, this first line of code that says public class form 1, and the last line of code, end class. It is very important that you understand that all of your lines of code must be between these two lines. Anything outside these lines will end up giving you an error, and the error message will more than likely not be exactly where the error is actually occurring. So please make certain that you have your code in the right locations and that you have not written any code outside the public class form 1 line or your end class. In addition, you want to also make certain that all of your sub procedures, and you can see them, they say sub, we'll talk about what the private meaning is later, but right now you want to just notice that these are sub procedures, and with every sub procedure you have an end sub. So make certain that your procedures have ends and that your class has an end, and that you have not written outside of your sub procedure lines of code or your class lines of code. As a challenge, I would like for you to add another group box that will allow the user to say goodbye in English, French, or German. This is the second portion of the walkthrough assignment that you can easily see how to be guided through that by reading through the last few bullets. Again, please add another group box with 3 radio buttons for English, German, and French for the user to be able to say goodbye when those radio buttons have been clicked. If you have any questions, please let me know.